Montana's home for rock and country, 105.9 The Bar. It's 8:23. 23 after 8. Look for a high today, expected about 40 degrees, and a special in-studio guest this morning, Congressman Denny Rehberg. Good morning, Congressman.
Mark Anthony, I grew up listening to you.
Yeah, I know you did. You know, and the funny thing about it is, everybody did.
Yep.
On Cook Radio back in the 70s.
That's right.
Yeah. You know, and
there weren't many stations back then, and of course we came in from the ranch every morning to go to school in town because my mom was a school teacher here in Billings.
Right.
So we spent a lot of time listening to the radio when Cook was in.
Yeah, and I was on with Dan Miller for
Major Dan.
for a lot of years, and you know, but you got to remember something when you say you've grown up listening to me. I started in radio when I was 12.
I don't believe you.
Maybe not quite 12. Anyway, so it's good to have you here. So, so what's going on in Washington?
Oh, nothing. Well, I'll tell you, it's been a whirlwind the last 3 weeks.
Right.
And what we've done is try and hold the fire hydrant, the water from rushing out as fast as we can. I mean, and we predicted this back in November, that there were 2 avenues that could have been taken by the administration and by Congress, the new Congress, and that was to address the economic stimulus or the economic crisis through a stimulus package, or use the crisis to change a social agenda. And they took the second. They, rather than just addressing themselves to the crisis itself and seeing that the legislation that was moving forward would in fact create the jobs that are intended, this thing is so spending-laden, pork-laden, that ultimately it's a crushing debt that they're putting not just on the next generation, but we're going to see some of the effects on our generation as well. You cannot increase debt that quickly and expect there not to be some kind of inflation or some kind of a payback, because ultimately that money just doesn't get spent and then disappear. We have to pay it back.
Somewhere down the road.
Somewhere down the road.
Yeah, and it's probably going to be quicker than we think in most cases. So now I have, given that caveat and going that direction, I was, I don't know, one of the talk shows that I was listening to or watching, and it was Glenn Beck, I think it was.
Yep.
And I don't know if he just, had a couple of minor strokes, but he starts talking about the fact that what we're heading for with this package is depression and revolution. Now I thought, that's a little aggressive. And so, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, certainly we're going to have to pay it back, but we still have an opportunity to do the right thing along the way. If we can control our spending, remember that this is just the beginning of the appropriation cycle, or the spending cycle for a year. This Congress now still has to address the last Congress's inability to finish their work. The budget was supposed to be in place by October 1st. It still is not done. So now we begin the process of debating a $400 billion appropriation bill for this year. And we simultaneously have to start dealing with the fiscal year 10 budget, because it has to be in place by next October. And I hear the president this morning talking about a $50 billion housing package, and there's what's called a supplemental, which means there wasn't enough spent in '08. They want to backfill the less spending. And so they want to backfill it, and they're anticipating that's going to be another $100 billion. And so fiscal conservatism still has an opportunity to jump in at any stage here and try and say, slow down, boys. We cannot continue to spend our way into prosperity because it isn't going to work. What we need to do is really talk about the kind of tax relief. And let me throw a number out to you. We figured it out, and we presented it as an alternative. For the same $1 trillion they spent in this package on things like the $8 billion to build the high-speed rail between Las Vegas and Los Angeles, if we took the same $1 trillion and said, okay, are you going to spend $1 trillion on economic stimulus? Yeah, we can do that. If you cut payroll taxes for every working American for 1 year, that costs you $1 trillion. Cut everybody's, eliminate it, zero it out, no payroll taxes for a year. That would cost you $1 trillion. So that goes to show you that the paltry amount that they put in tax relief isn't going to do enough to stimulate the economy. And so, the question becomes, how is this business that you're in right here, your radio station is wonderful because you're communicating, but your job is not to communicate. Your job is to actually make a living for the employees and expand this business and grow. what does this package do for your radio station as a business? What we suggested doing was cutting the small business tax from 35% to 25%, to cut every American's taxes from, let's use the marginal rates of 15% to 10%, and from 10% to 5%. Those are two different classifications. That hits 500,000 workers in the state of Montana, 550,000. That's almost all of the workers. If we had done it that way, rather than doing what they did, and mostly what it is just a spending bill.